Ava Morgan had lost track of how many doors she had knocked on that week. She moved from one storefront to another across Portland, clutching a folder of documents she hoped would convince someone, anyone, that she was worth hiring. She was barely in her 20s, but the exhaustion in her eyes made her look older. Each rejection felt heavier than the last because every "we're not hiring" pushed her further from the one thing she wanted more than anything: getting her little brother, Sammy, back. CPS had made the requirements painfully clear. To regain custody, she needed stable housing, stable income, and proof she could provide consistency. Consistency sounded simple, but not when employers kept looking at her like a risk. Too young, too inexperienced, too fragile, too everything. Some offered part-time positions with wages so low they wouldn't even qualify as reliable earnings. Others didn't bother with excuses. They simply shook their heads before she finished speaking. By early afternoon, Ava's feet ached, and her hope felt thin as paper. She ended up in downtown Portland, settling onto a cold metal bench near Pioneer Courthouse Square. The winter air bit at her cheeks as she unwrapped a cheap pastry she'd bought from a street vendor. It wasn't hunger she was trying to satisfy. It was the growing panic in her chest, the kind that made her feel she might shatter if she didn't sit still for a moment. She took a slow breath. She had to be strong. Sammy needed her. He was only 6, still believing she would come for him soon. She had promised. Breaking that promise wasn't an option. As she leaned back, her elbow brushed against something stiff. A folded newspaper lay abandoned beside her, edges curling for moisture. Ava wouldn't normally pay attention to something like that, but a bold headline in the classified section caught her eye as she absently flipped through the pages. Driver needed. Female applicants preferred. The pastry nearly slipped from her hand. A driver? She almost laughed bitterly. Of all jobs, of all possibilities, driving was the one thing she had sworn she would never do again. Ever since her father's crash, the night everything changed, sitting behind a wheel felt like touching fire. But CPS didn't care about her past trauma. They cared about pay stubs, hours, and income stability. And this job, strange as it sounded, might actually meet those requirements. Ava stared at the words again. Her pulse thudded. She could walk away and keep searching, or she could break the vow she had carried for years. She closed her eyes. For Sammy, maybe she had no choice. Ava's earliest memories were shaped not by playgrounds or classrooms, but by the hum of engines and the warm, yellow glow of her father's garage in Gresham, while other kids spent weekends at parks. She spent hers covered in motor oil, passing wrenches to a man who loved cars almost as much as he loved his children. Her father could listen to an engine and tell exactly what was wrong. He said machines made sense, people were harder. By the time Ava was 10, she was already slipping into the driver's seat whenever he let her. Her legs barely reached the pedals, but she learned the rhythm of shifting, the balance of braking, the subtle weight of the wheel. Her father would laugh, shaking his head in disbelief as she maneuvered the old pickup around the empty lot behind the shop. By 14, she drove better than most adults. Neighbors joked about it, and her father never missed a chance to brag. She feels the car like it's part of her, he'd say, pride shining in his voice. Some kids learn to ride a bike. Mine learns to read the road. For a while, life felt steady, almost peaceful. That changed the year Sammy was born. Her mother's death came suddenly, a complication no one saw coming. Ava remembered the moment the doctor stepped into the waiting room, the way her father's face collapsed, as if the world beneath him had shifted. From then on, grief seemed to coil around him like a shadow. He tried to stay present for Ava and the baby, but something inside him had cracked. Nights grew longer. The smell of alcohol crept into the house. He talked less, smiled almost never. Ava tried to help, tried to keep the family together, but she was still a teenager, trying to hold up a world too heavy for her shoulders. Then came the night he took the car and drove toward the cemetery. He never made it. The crash ended everything. A week later, CPS arrived with paperwork, sympathetic voices, and rigid rules. They said Ava couldn't provide stability. No income. No adult supervision. No way to care for an infant. Sammy was taken into foster care, while Ava watched helplessly, feeling her world split open again. In the silence of that empty house, she made a promise. She would never drive again. The will had already taken too much, her mother, her father, her family. She swore she would never touch it, until now. The next morning, Ava took 2 buses to reach West Hills, climbing higher and higher until the city noise faded into quiet, tree-lined streets. The house she was looking for stood behind a wrought iron gate, perched on a slope with sweeping views of Portland below. It was the kind of place she had only ever seen in magazines, large, immaculate, intimidating. She tightened her grip on her folder, reminding herself that she had nothing left to lose. Still, she expected another rejection. A house this impressive surely meant high standards, strict expectations, and an employer who would see her as yet another underqualified girl with too many problems. A housekeeper answered the door and led her inside. Moments later, Ava found herself standing in a spacious living room as Alexander Alex Bennett wheeled toward her. He looked to be in his late 40s, sharp-featured, composed, but with a heaviness in his eyes that suggested long battles with pain. His wheelchair moved smoothly over the hardwood floor, revealing how accustomed he was to it. "So," he said, studying her carefully, "you're applying for the driving position?" Ava nodded, trying not to fidget. "Yes, sir." He folded his hands in his lap. "I prefer a female driver, in my experience. Women tend to drive more cautiously. I appreciate caution these days." His words were simple, but Ava could feel the weight beneath them. A racing accident. She recalled from the article she once saw online, a well-known businessman injured during a charity motorsport event. The crash had taken his mobility, and, judging from his expression, much more than that. She swallowed, keeping her voice steady. "I can drive safely. Smoothly, too." Alex raised an eyebrow. "Everyone says that. Come with me." Outside, a polished black SUV waited in the driveway. Ava's pulse quickened. She hadn't touched a steering wheel in years. Not since the accident that shattered her family. But this moment wasn't about her fear. It was about Sammy. She slid into the driver's seat, adjusting it with practiced ease. The familiar scent of leather and engine oil hit her. Stirring memories she tried to push aside. Alex watched from the back seat, silent, observant. When she started the engine, she listened first to the idle, to the vibration. "The weight distribution feels front-heavy," she murmured, almost without thinking. "Braking will need a softer touch." Alex looked up, interest flickering. "Go on." They took a slow loop through the winding hills. She navigated curves with steady hands, avoided potholes instinctively, and maintained perfect lane position. She spoke about torque, balance, responsiveness, the language her father had taught her. For the first time in a long while, driving didn't feel like a wound. It felt like something she still understood. When they returned to the driveway, Alex remained quiet for a moment. Then he exhaled softly. "You're hired," he said. "Tell me what paperwork CPS needs. I'll take care of it." Ava's breath caught. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel dangerous. It felt real. A month passed, marked by long days, strict schedules, and paperwork that seemed endless. But for the first time since losing her family, Ava felt movement, real progress. With Alex's legal and financial support, she finally met every requirement CPS had set before her. Stable income, consistent hours, proper housing, and verified ability to provide daily care. Her new job had given her more than a paycheck. It had given her a chance. When CPS called to confirm Sammy's release, Ava nearly dropped the phone. She arrived at the foster home early, breathless, her hands shaking with anticipation. And then the door opened. Sammy stood there with his small backpack, eyes wide and fearful, the way a child looks when the world has already taken too much from him. For a moment, he didn't move. Then, as if recognizing something he had been trying not to hope for, he burst forward, throwing himself into Ava's arms. He sobbed into her shoulder, clutching her like she might vanish if he blinked. "Are they going to take me again?" he whispered, voice trembling. "No," Ava said, holding him tighter. "I'm here now. You're coming home with me. I promise." But the fear stayed in his eyes, even as she buckled him into the car seat. His small fingers wrapped around her sleeve, tugging every few seconds to make sure she hadn't disappeared. His tears smeared across her shoulder, warm and desperate. She didn't hide her own. Back at her apartment, Sammy explored cautiously, every sound drawing him back to her side. He refused to let go of her hand for more than a moment. The reunion, raw, emotional, painful, mirrored the original heartache of their separation. It was everything she had dreamed of and everything she had dreaded. He was home, but he was wounded. Later that evening, after settling Sammy with a blanket and a bowl of cereal, his comfort food, Ava drove to West Hills to update Alex. She expected him to meet her at the door with that quiet, polite nod he always gave. Instead, she found the house dim and unusually silent. Martha Reyes stepped out from the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "He's in his room," she said softly. Ava frowned. "Is he okay?" Martha sighed, glancing toward the closed door upstairs. "He's shutting down again. Ever since the CPS process wrapped up, he barely comes out. He stopped doing therapy, says it's pointless. But the doctors think he could recover more if he tried." Ava felt a heaviness settle in her chest. She had been so focused on bringing Sammy home that she hadn't seen Alex slipping back into the shadows of his mind. "He helped me get my brother back," she whispered. "I can't just let him fall apart." Martha nodded. "I didn't think you would." Ava returned to the West Hills house 2 days later, carrying a folder of updated employment documents Alex had asked for. Sammy was finally settling into a rhythm at home, and for the first time in years, Ava felt something steady forming beneath her feet. She hoped Alex might feel even a fraction of that hopefulness. Maybe she could tell him about Sammy's first night home, the way he finally slept without waking from nightmares. But when she stepped inside, the house felt strangely still, quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Martha greeted her with a tight smile, then pointed upstairs. "He's with someone," she whispered. "Maybe wait a moment." Ava nodded, but as she approached the study to leave the documents outside the door, she froze. Voices drifted through the barely cracked doorway. Alex's voice and another man's, older measured. "Robert," Alex said, tone flat, "I want the allocation finalized. If anything happens to me, I don't want loose ends." Ava's breath caught. She recognized the second voice, Robert Callahan, his estate attorney. Her pulse quickened as she instinctively leaned closer. "Alex," Robert replied gently, "we've worked through this before. You're not in immediate danger. There's no need to rush." "I don't care about that," Alex murmured. "I just need to know everything's in order. After I'm gone." Ava felt the floor tilt beneath her. Robert's chair creaked. "Are you thinking about stopping treatment again?" A long silence. Then Alex spoke in a voice she had never heard from him, quiet, hollow, stripped bare. "I have everything," he said, "except a reason to live." The sentence landed like a blow. Ava pressed a hand to her mouth. She had known he was struggling, but hearing it spoken so plainly, he wasn't just hopeless. He was preparing for the end. Not tomorrow, maybe not next week. But he was arranging his life as if it no longer included him. Robert cleared his throat, sounding shaken. "Alex, don't do this to yourself. You're not alone. But Alex didn't respond. Ava backed away from the door, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She hurried downstairs, gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles whitened. Martha looked up the moment she saw her face. What happened? What's wrong? Ava swallowed hard. He's planning for his death, Martha. He's talking to his attorney about assets, about being gone. And he said he has no reason to live. Martha's expression crumpled. She lowered her gaze, voice trembling. I was afraid of that. He's been slipping for months, ever since the accident. I've tried to reach him, but he shuts me out. Ava felt a sharp ache bloom in her chest. The man who had helped her get Sammy back, who had given her hope, was drowning alone. She couldn't let him stay there. Martha found Ava still shaken later that afternoon, sitting at the edge of the kitchen counter, staring at her hands as if trying to piece together what she had heard upstairs. The housekeeper hesitated before speaking, her voice low and careful. There's something you should know, she said. Alex's birthday is in 2 days. Ava lifted her head. 2 days? Martha nodded. He won't mention it. He never does. Not since the accident. He hates reminders of time passing, of everything he lost. The words lingered in the air. 2 days. A man preparing his will. Convinced he had no reason to live. Sitting alone on a birthday he refused to acknowledge. Ava felt her chest tighten. She couldn't erase his grief, but she could try to show him he wasn't invisible, that someone cared. A reckless idea began to form, frightening, risky, but the only thing that felt right. What if we celebrated it anyway? She whispered. Martha's eyes widened. A surprise? Ava, if he reacts badly, I know, Ava said. He could fire me. And if I lose this job, you could lose Sammy's stability, Martha finished softly. Ava swallowed hard. The stakes were brutal. Everything she had fought for, her job, her home, her brother, could crumble with one misstep. But the sound of Alex's voice in that study haunted her. I have everything except a reason to live. She couldn't let that be his truth. I'm still doing it, she said finally. He deserved to feel something other than despair, even for one night. Martha studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. All right, if we're doing this, we'll do it properly. The next afternoon, Ava took Sammy to a small toy store near Hawthorne. They spent nearly an hour wandering the aisles, Sammy examining every box with intense concentration. It reminded Ava of how much her father loved model cars and engines, and how Alex seemed drawn to anything mechanical. When Sammy found a large model construction set, heavy, colorful, and challenging, his eyes lit up. This one, he declared, hugging the box. He'll like building it, and I can help. Ava couldn't help smiling. It was perfect. Back at the West Hills house, Martha had already begun cooking in absolute secrecy. She moved quietly, checking the hallway every few minutes to make sure the sounds didn't reach Alex's room. The aroma of roasted vegetables and warm spices began to fill the kitchen. We'll keep the lights off, Martha whispered. Set the table after he goes upstairs. He won't suspect a thing. Ava exhaled. For the first time since hearing that devastating conversation, she felt a small flicker of hope. 2 days. One chance. They would make it count. The evening of Alex's birthday arrived with a quiet heaviness that settled over the West Hills house like a fog. The dining room, usually dim and unused, had been transformed, not extravagantly, just thoughtfully. Martha had arranged plates, silverware, and the small cake Ava had managed to buy. In the center of the table, 3 candles waited to be lit. The lights were off, leaving only the faint glow of the setting sun pushing through the curtains. Ava stood beside Sammy in the shadows, her palms damp, her breath shallow. This could go wrong, very wrong, but she forced herself to stay still, repeating silently, he needs this. He needs to feel something. Martha was the one who went upstairs to retrieve him. Ava listened to the soft murmur of their voices. then the faint whir of wheels approaching, growing louder until the chair rolled into the doorway. Alex looked irritated, confused. "Martha," he snapped lightly, "what is this? Why are the lights off? I told you I'd eat in my room tonight." His voice held sharp edges, the kind born from someone who has been alone too long. "Just come in," Martha said, her tone carefully neutral. She pushed his chair into the room. Ava's heartbeat pounded in her ears. Sammy squeezed her hand, trying to stay quiet but practically vibrating with anticipation. Then Martha gave a small nod. Ava flipped the switch. The room flooded with warm light. "Happy birthday," she said softly. Alex froze. His hands stilled on the armrests. His eyes moved from the decorated table to the cake, then to Ava, and finally to Sammy peeking out from behind her leg. A long, painful silence stretched out. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. His face didn't move at all, except for the slight tightening of his jaw. Ava felt her stomach drop. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she had pushed too far. Then Sammy broke away from her side and walked up to Alex with the unguarded bravery only a child could have. "I made this for you," he said, holding out his drawing with both hands. "It's a big car. And you. Because Ava says you like cars." Alex blinked. His fingers trembled as he took the paper. The drawing was simple, crude lines, bright colors, but something in it pierced him. His eyes glistened. He wiped at them quickly, angry at the betrayal of emotion. "I see," he muttered, clearing his throat. "Very impressive." Sammy beamed. Ava held her breath, waiting for the verdict, rejection or acceptance, anger or gratitude. She didn't know which one would come. But then Alex lowered the drawing and exhaled slowly, the fight leaving his shoulders. "Well," he whispered, voice hoarse, "we should at least have some cake." The tension shattered like glass. Sammy burst into chatter instantly, excitedly telling Alex about the construction set they brought and how he planned to build the tallest tower ever. Martha smiled with relief. Ava felt her knees weaken. Finally, the air in the room was soft again. For the first time since the accident, the house didn't feel cold. The birthday changed something in the house, subtle at first, then unmistakable. It was as if a long-sealed window had finally been cracked open, letting in air no one realized they'd been suffocating without. The morning after the celebration, Alex appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual, hair still damp from a shower, a mug of coffee balanced carefully in his hand. "I called my therapist," he announced simply. "I'm resuming sessions." Martha nearly dropped the spatula she was holding. Ava didn't hide her smile, and he followed through. Over the next weeks, Alex pushed himself with a quiet determination, attending physical therapy 3 times a week. He scheduled massage sessions to help his muscles recover. He spent afternoons reading by the window or reviewing work files, trying to rebuild a routine that resembled the one he had before the accident, structured, intentional, alive. But the biggest change was Sammy. Alex bought him toys, trains, and model cars, small things but chosen carefully, the kind of toys that encouraged focus and imagination. He set aside time every day for Sammy's visits, arranging his mornings so he'd be free by mid-afternoon. It quickly became their ritual. Sammy knocking on the study door, Alex greeting him with a half-smile, and the two settling into projects on the floor like they'd known each other for years. Sammy thrived under Alex's steady presence. He absorbed routines, responded to gentle correction, and lit up whenever Alex praised his progress. Ava watched in quiet disbelief. She had always tried to teach Sammy to read, but he struggled, too restless, too anxious, too unsure. With Alex, it was different. Alex's patience seemed to reach him in ways she couldn't. One rainy evening, Ava stepped into the living room to find Sammy sitting on Alex's lap, tracing letters in a picture book. Alex spoke slowly, carefully. "See? B makes the but sound. Try it." "But," Sammy repeated, proud of himself. B is for book. Alex laughed softly. Exactly. Ava leaned against the doorway, feeling something warm bloom in her chest. She had never imagined her brother would feel this safe with someone again. But then it happened. So abruptly she wasn't sure she heard it correctly. Dad, can we? Sammy froze mid-sentence. His eyes widened. His breath hitched. He looked from Alex to Ava as if terrified he'd broken something fragile. Alex didn't move for several seconds. His hands tightened on the armrests of his chair, and a flicker of shock crossed his face, followed by something deeper, something raw. Ava felt her heart drop. The room was silent, weighted with emotion too complicated for a child to understand. Then Alex exhaled slowly, steadying himself. It's all right, he murmured. You didn't do anything wrong. Sammy whimpered, burying his face in his shirt. Ava rushed forward, pulling him into her arms. But Alex leaned in slightly, voice gentle. You're okay, kiddo. Really. No one said the word again, but it lingered, aching, unspoken, powerful, a sign of a new life forming. Whether any of them were ready for it or not. Ava found Alex in his study late in the afternoon, sunlight streaming across the hardwood floor in long, warm stripes. He was standing near the bookshelf, standing, not sitting, his hand resting lightly on the back of his wheelchair as if he'd forgotten why it was there. She stopped in the doorway, stunned. He didn't seem to notice the significance of the moment. He simply gestured for her to come in. Close the door, please, he said quietly. Ava obeyed, her pulse quickening. There was something different about him today. Steady, intent, almost nervous. I want to talk to you, he continued. About something important. She nodded, waiting. Alex took a breath, steadying himself. I've been thinking a lot since the birthday. About the house. My life. The accident. Everything. His voice wavered, just slightly, but he pushed on. For the first time in a long while. I want to live. Truly live. Ava's chest tightened. He glanced toward the window, then back at her. I want Sammy to start school fully prepared. He's smart, he deserves stability and guidance. And he responds to structure, to routine, he hesitated, embarrassed. To me. Ava swallowed hard. He trusts you. Alex nodded. I want to build on that. And I want you both here. In this house. With me. She blinked. Move in. Yes. He met her eyes without flinching. You've been running on fear for years. He's been running on loss. You both need something steady. I can give you that. And in return, you give this place life again. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected this. Certainly not so soon. And not with this quiet intensity. But Alex wasn't finished. He shifted his weight, still unaware that he was standing without support. There's one more thing, he said softly. Sammy deserves legal protection. He needs someone besides you, someone courts will take seriously, someone with resources and standing. I've been considering becoming his co-guardian. Ava stared at him, unable to speak. Alex cleared his throat, cheeks flushing faintly. And to avoid legal issues, inheritance questions, emergency medical decisions, housing complications, it might be easier if he winced. If we married. Purely for practical reasons, of course. Ava's face grew warm. She looked down at her hands, then at him, then away again. Practical or not, the idea made her heart flutter in a way she wasn't prepared for. She had imagined it, quietly, secretly, but never believed he would. I know it's sudden, Alex added quickly, and maybe inappropriate, and you can say no. Truly. Ava stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to say no. For the first time in years, Alex let himself smile. Small, disbelieving, fragile. Then, is that a yes? Ava nodded, tears pricking her eyes. Yes. The answer hung between them, trembling with tenderness and fear and something that felt dangerously like hope. The next month unfolded in a way none of them could have predicted. Everything moved quickly, but nothing felt rushed. Alex and Ava were married in a small ceremony at the courthouse downtown. A simple exchange of vows, a modest bouquet from Martha, and Sammy standing proudly between them in a tiny suit that was slightly too big for him. There were no guests, no elaborate decorations, no speeches. Just the three of them, choosing each other. Sammy adapted immediately, almost instinctively, to the new rhythm of their life together. He followed Alex around the house, helping him with stretching exercises, handing him resistance bands, counting reps in a serious little voice. Whenever Alex managed a new movement, Sammy clapped like he'd just witnessed a miracle. And in a way he had. Alex was regaining mobility, piece by piece, rediscovering a strength he once believed he'd lost forever. Evenings became their favorite time. Sammy would curl up beside Alex on the couch with a book, proudly showing off every letter he recognized. Alex corrected him gently, never impatient, always encouraging. Ava watched them from the armchair sometimes, overwhelmed by how natural it all felt. There was no awkward adjustment, no forced affection. It was as if their three lives had been fragments of the same story, finally brought together where they belonged. The house in West Hills changed too. What once felt like a cold, echoing space, sterile and untouched, gradually warmed with life. Sammy's toys lined one corner of the living room. Ava's jacket hung on the hallway hook beside Alex's. The kitchen smelled of Martha's, cooking again, rich and comforting. Laughter, once rare, returned in quiet waves. The home was no longer a monument to Alex's loss. It was a living, breathing place of beginnings. Alex continued therapy with renewed determination. He walked short distances now, using the wheelchair only when he grew tired. Each step was deliberate, careful, but full of hope. Sometimes he stumbled, sometimes he overdid it, but Ava was always there with a steadying touch, and Sammy was always there with wide eyes and endless encouragement. One evening, as the three of them stood on the balcony overlooking Portland's twinkling lights, Sammy reached up and held both their hands. Alex squeezed gently. Ava leaned her head against his shoulder. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic assurances, just a quiet, shared understanding. Their family was not built from bloodlines or tradition. It was built from survival and loss, from gentle choices, from the fragile decision to try again after life had broken them in different ways. It was built from courage, the kind that whispers instead of shouts. And that was enough. More than enough. A second chance at life, finally embraced,